في عدد المجلة هذا الأسبوع معالم أثرية ثلاثية الأبعاد مع بن كثيرة. التصوير الفوتوغرافي مع ليلى عبد الهادي جد الله. أهلا بكم مشاهدينا، أنا كورين فرحات أرحب بكم بعدد جديد من المجلة نبدأه من سان فرانسيسكو وحوار مع المهندس المدني الأمريكي العراقي الأصل بن كثيرة. نجاح كثيرة تمثل بتأسيسه لشركة سايارك الغير ربحية والتي يعمل من خلالها على توثيق المعالم الأثرية مستخدما التكنولوجيا الحديثة والمسح الثلاثي الأبعاد للحفاظ عليها للأجيال القادمة.
When I saw what happened to the Buddhas in Afghanistan, I started thinking, what else do we need to deploy that, not only to preserve these heritage sites in excruciating detail, but also to be able to tell the story.
جاء تدمير تمثال بوذا باميان البالغ عمره 1600 عام على يد طالبان في العام 2001 حافزاً لميلاد منظمة سايارك في العام 2003، وهي منظمة غير ربحية للتقنيات المتقدمة في منطقة خليج سان فرانسيسكو في كاليفورنيا، تعمل على توثيق مواقع التراث الثقافي في أرجاء العالم وحفظها في صورة رقمية.
The destruction that was happening, both natural phenomena as earthquakes, etc., as well as man-made destructive actions, unfortunately, was increasing exponentially with the explosion of world population and industrialization. And that's where SIARC comes in with a very fast, very inexpensive method using digital technology to at least preserve these digitally for future generations and have that documentation available to the world as the world needs it in the future.
على الرغم كونه يعيش الحلم الأمريكي، فإن بن كثيرة المهندس المدني المولود في العراق احتفظ في قلبه بحب للتاريخ.
I can't explain these things. They stay in your psyche. And my recollection of these are very fond because my dad loved history and loved archaeology. I loved engineering, but as things transpired and as I got older and I saw what my children were doing, and I started feeling that they need to know the past, and that's what got me back into history.
اشتهر بن في أواخر التسعينات بماسحه الضوئي الليزري المحمول المتقدم والمسمى سيراكس. تستخدم هذه التكنولوجيا الليزر لخلق سجل رقمي ثلاثي الأبعاد لمواقع ومناظر طبيعية، ويمكن استخدام هذه البيانات في التصوير ثلاثي الأبعاد والتخطيط ورسم النماذج، ويجري استخدامها حالياً على مستوى العالم في فن العمارة والهندسة والبناء.
We were very fortunate that my technology company came up with the very first portable laser scanning system with integrated software that allowed us to, in construction, to create an order of magnitude improvement in productivity, in detail, and in resolution for capturing structures. Think of these 3D scanners as almost like cameras. These scanners can see whatever is in front of them. So what you have to do, depending on whether you're inside or outside, you have to place these scanners at different locations. If you're going around a structure, you move the scanner just like you do with a camera, and then you come back and stitch everything in the same way you do a panorama.
المساحات الضوئية الليزرية ثلاثية الأبعاد بالغة السرعة وشديدة الدقة في تصوير مئات الآلاف من نقاط القياس في الثانية، ما يعطي لفريق سايارك السرعة في إنشاء سجل رقمي للموقع.
What we have done in order to enhance the experience of visualization is we're now combining it with digital photography. So while we're scanning, we're also taking photographs from the location of the scanner. So it gives you both the what I would call the naked laser scan, as well as the very photorealistic 3D model of the structure. And depending on the media you want to produce, but to produce media for conservators, as in blueprints, etc., so these conservators can understand the structure, as well as for educational purposes, it might take 2 to 3 more weeks for 2 to 3 people to continue that work in the field, and then it goes onto the website and it becomes available to the public. SCI-Arc's policy is that the data is owned by the owner of the site. That is very important for us as a principle. The owner owns it. However, in order for us to come and work on a site and produce the work we produce, we require that the owner gives us a license to use the data for non-profit purposes.
لتمكين المجتمعات المحلية في مجال نقل التقنية محلياً، أسست سيارك العديد من المراكز التقنية.
We have partners all over the world who work with us. These are all the way from governmental institutions all the way to corporations and universities, etc. UNESCO, as you know, is the world foremost entity that cares about heritage sites all over the world, and in fact they have their famous list. There are very tough requirements for any site in the world to become a UNESCO World Heritage Site. We partner with a university or a college, and we get them the equipment and help train them, etc. And they help us preserve their sites. So we would love to, especially in the Middle East, to establish some technology centers in collaboration with local universities, local high schools, who can then go out and do the local sites themselves.
بغض النظر عن الوضع الحرج في العراق، بقي بن كثيرة على ارتباط بتراث وطنه، فعملت سيارك على توثيق بعض من آثار القرون القديمة.
As you know, it is not very safe to go everywhere in the Middle East today. But because of our passion for doing this work, we have done some portions of Babylon, for example. And our team had to wear bulletproof vests to go there, and they were escorted by a government team to allow us to go do that, and we did that. We finished another project in the Horn of Africa, and prior to that we had done some work in Cairo, and so we are very, very anxious and prepared to collaborate with agencies and governments in order to go there and at least preserve these digitally.
في العام 2013 وبهدف الحفاظ على أكبر عدد من المواقع التراثية الثقافية، أعلن بن كثيرة من برج لندن بدء مشروع سيارك 500 للسنوات الخمس المقبلة.
We have formed a council. This council, which we call the 500 Council, is made up of authorities from all over the world who are experts in World Heritage and World Heritage sites and selection of sites. So we have many of our experts on this council come from ICOMOS and from universities all over the world who have the expertise in site selection, in site maintenance and site preservation. And that body, that council, is the one that guides us in the 500 work. As part of our launch in London, we announced a program where we opened up an application, and we asked the world authorities to submit a letter of intent, a letter of interest to SCI-Arc about each of the sites that they would like to be included in the 500. I will feel my mission is accomplished when this movement that I call SCI-Arc, and I feel more about it as a movement. When this movement has actually taken root and is moving forward throughout the world in small communities of passionate people in each country or in each city who have formed a local SCI-Arc, who we can help with equipment, with technology, with help raise funding. We can help them then establish that local small community that can do its own preservation. I will feel much better when that is being done locally all over the world rather than from somewhere with a single entity operating.
بعد الفاصل التصوير الفوتوغرافي مع ليلى عبد الهادي جد الله. أهلا بكم مجددا. نكمل عددنا من العاصمة واشنطن وحوار مع المصورة الأمريكية الفلسطينية الأصل ليلى عبد الهادي جد الله، والصور التقطتها عدستها تعكس الأماكن التي عاشت فيها وما تمثله لها.
My name is Layla Abdel Hadi Jadallah. I'm Palestinian American. I live in Washington, D.C. I'm a photographer and I work in the arts and the museum field. I work at a small arts organization in Washington called International Arts and Artists. So we develop exhibitions with other museums all over the country and sometimes internationally, or work with curators as well to develop shows and take them all around to different museums. I've always been connected to being creative since I was very young, but I didn't discover my path really until I went to George Mason and studied art as social action and photography. I was just very lucky that I had very supportive parents who really instilled in my brother and sister and I since a young age to really be able to do what we wanted. You know, my father as an immigrant, first-generation immigrant to the US, didn't have the opportunity to study what he wanted, so he studied law. And so he and my mother were very supportive of us studying what we really wanted to do and what our aspirations were. You know, when I see the news and how the Arab world is constantly changing, of course, as a photographer and being from the region, I would love to go there and photograph, you know, how overnight so much is changing in the area. I always say that my father's dream for me was to be a photojournalist, but I realized I was far too emotional to do that. So that's the power of photography, though, is that you can really address so many issues in many different ways. In the summer of 2008, I spent 2 months living in Bethlehem and teaching children photography at one of the refugee camps in the area, and it was one of the most emotional but also very rewarding experiences that I've done, and just really being able to share my love for photography with Palestinian children and helping give them an outlet for really expressing themselves, and also being able to share, you know, what their daily lives are like, which many people aren't aware of or don't know. And I think that's really the most powerful thing about photography, is how one image can really change people's perspective. And I think it's good to give children that opportunity to express themselves in that way. While I lived in Palestine, I was able to visit my family in Nablus and Ramallah, and my uncle took me to my grandmother's house where she grew up, and as well as my grandfather's house. And so it was very moving to finally be able to see a lot of the places that I've heard so much about through my grandmother's stories especially, and I really felt why she loved where she was from so much.
هويتها الفلسطينية الأمريكية سببت لها أرقاً، فقررت ليلى أن تترك واشنطن وتذهب إلى باريس لدراسة الماجستير في التصوير الفوتوغرافي، على أمل أن يساعدها هذا القرار على اكتشاف ذاتها.
Paris was a dream year, getting to live there for 1 year to do my master's. And while I was there, I was able to do some fashion and portrait photography, working with a lot of young designers. Do portraiture of fashion, you spend many hours doing Photoshop, so it's a skill that I have many hours in, but that I'm not as inspired by as really the rawness and the surprise you get when you shoot in film or when you just have a photo for what it is and what you have at the time.
أثناء وجودها في باريس قامت ليلى برحلة إلى المغرب، حيث اكتشفت شغفاً جديداً وهو تصوير المناظر الطبيعية، وولد مشروع جديد من تلك الرحلة، سلسلة بلا هدف.
So Adrift started when I was doing my master's in Paris in photography. I visited my father and that in Morocco, and that was the first time as an adult I was able to spend time with my father and really talk about, you know, where we're from and his decision to move us to the US to grow up here, and just, you know, being Palestinian and thinking about how you really have to create homes in many different places around the world when you're not able to live where you're from. And that was really my starting point for the series. And my father took me on a drive around the entire country of Morocco in 1 week. We spent 7 days in the car from morning until night and really just seeing everything that Morocco has to offer. And at the time, I was just so taken back by how beautiful the country was and all of the different typography that it has in its landscapes, from the desert to the mountains, the forests, the cities, all the small towns and valleys that we saw. And I wanted to have a different perspective that, you know, people haven't seen of Morocco, or a different a way of seeing it. And so I just decided to shoot multiple exposures of all of the places that we were, and I did it in the camera. So I took 2 or 3 photos in the camera, and I had never done landscape photography and it really hadn't inspired me before, but I was just so blown away by what I saw and very inspired to try to capture it in a way. From this series, I have about 2,000 photos that I took in Morocco, and then I believe another 1,000 when I was in Turkey, where I continued part of this series. And my favorite photos, there's one in Morocco. About halfway through our trip, we were driving through hours and hours of farmland, and the sky was sort of turning dark. I believe it was about to storm, and so there's just this amazing contrast between this farmland and the clouds overhead, and somehow the color came out with this purple overtone. When I showed Adrift in January of 2014, I worked with the gallery to really try to evoke an ambiance of where the photos are from, as well as how the viewers will react to the photographs. So I brought in some lights that I bought from Istanbul, as well as pillows from Morocco and doors that my family has from Morocco as well, to try to give people an idea of, you know, creating a home, have this home feeling, which I tried to talk about in this series. You know, it's really a series that's a reflection on where I'm from and you know, where others are from, and really, you know, being Palestinian and realizing that you know, my family and many other friends and family have made homes in many other parts of the world, the Arab world, the US, you know, all over Europe, and that you know, now with the Arab Spring and many of the changes we're seeing now all over the Arab world, is that the land is really what changes and also what suffers in a lot of the social and political changes that are happening. And so the moving landscapes aspect of the series is a reflection on, you know, how much Palestine has changed from the time that my grandparents were born and lived there, and my father and mother as well, to what I saw when I was there in 2008. And even now, you know, going back, what it looks like, it's not the same as it was when I was there, I'm sure.
مشاهدينا شكرا للمتابعة. في النهاية أذكركم بصفحتنا المجلة شو على الفيسبوك لتعليقاتكم المجلة الحرة.com، وأنا بلاقيكم الأسبوع المقبل بنفس الموعد.